Hello, good morning.
Hello, hello.
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 Hey, good to see you. Hi, Pola. Hi, António. All right. Any questions to begin with? Anything to share?
Don't have anything coming right now, Peter.
Okay.
Me neither.
All right. So today I would like to read a few more verses of Avadhut Gita. We'll be able to finish chapter 1. And also there is a practice that is shared by Swami Sivananda in his book, Kundalini Yoga. And you could think of it as a simplified Kriya practice. And we'll be going into these, especially in a different training cycle, in the Kundalini Clarity cycle, but you can also start practicing this now. And by then, you'll be more familiar with it. And we'll start working on how you can help other people with these practices. And also wanted to mention I've been doing the timestamps in the descriptions of the videos.
Thank you.
And I've been doing it in quite a lot of detail in the videos that I've completed. And it might even be too much detail for you to use them in the usual way that you'd use timestamps, where they're chapters. I've done it where even just specific phrases are timestamped, because in some cases that you could say, think of them as key phrases, key points. And so if you're looking for things on the timestamps, just to be aware of that. They're sometimes very short moments within a larger context. The way that I've done the descriptions in different videos varies a little bit from one to another. So if you find one that really works well for you and you think, oh, this layout really makes sense to me, this works well, give me that feedback and I'll take that into consideration when creating the timestamps, because I'm still, you could say, experimenting with different ways of doing this. And so what works well for you would be, I'd love to have that feedback so I know what's most useful.
Okay.
Okay. By you could say melting into the reading of the Avadhut Gita, you could think of it as a meditation. So rather than doing a meditation today and the reading, let's just do the reading and I just invite you to let your way of sensing, listening, be you can be engaging with it in a way that is not requiring a lot of busyness in the mind to make sense of it, to evaluate, this I'm familiar with, this I'm not. The usual things that the mind might find itself triggered to do, you can give it permission to just listen. And that way you'll be able to experience the transmission of the Avadhut Gita, which is not really meant for rational analysis, even though in some cases it seems to be presenting you a rational argument, a reason for you to experience your true self. You know, in some cases it's kind of reasoning through the process. But even so, you can for now just listen and rest in the listening. Later on, you can come back and listen and analyze it if you feel that that would be helpful. And I'm saying this again, but I'm not asking you to not ask questions, to not share any doubts that you have. I welcome you to do that. So I'm going to just go back a few verses to pick up from where we were reading before. This is from verse 58 in chapter 1 of the Avadhut Gita. I'm not attained by knowledge or Samadhi or yoga, or by the passage of time or the Guru's instructions. I'm consciousness itself, the ultimate reality. Like the sky, though I change, I am ever the same. I have no birth, no death, and no duties. I've never done anything, neither good or bad. I'm purely Brahman, beyond all qualities. How could either bondage or liberation exist for me? If God is all-pervading, immovable, whole, without any parts, then there is no division in him at all. How then could he be regarded as within or without? The whole universe is shining as one, without any split or break or separate parts. The idea of Maya is itself the great delusion. Duality and non-duality are merely concepts of the mind. The world of form and the formless void, neither of these exists independently. In the one, there is neither separation nor union. Truly, there is nothing but Shiva alone. You have no mother, or father, or brother. You have no wife, or son, or friend. You have no attachments or non-attachments. How then do you justify this anxiety of mind? O mind, there is neither the day of manifestation nor the night of dissolution. My continuous light neither rises nor sets. How could a wise one sincerely believe that the formless existence is affected by forms? It is not undivided, nor is it divided. It experiences neither sorrow nor joy. It is not the universe, nor is it not the universe. Understand that the self is eternally one. I'm not the doer, nor am I the enjoyer. I have no karma, either present or past. I have no body, nor are all these bodies mine. What could be mine or not mine to me? In me, there is no impurity such as attachment. There is no bodily pain for me. Understand that I am the self. I am unity. I am vast as space, like the sky above. O mind, my friend, what's the good of so much speaking? O mind, my friend, all of this has been made quite clear. I've told you what I know to be true. You're the ultimate reality. You're unbounded like space. It doesn't matter where a yogi may die. It doesn't matter how he may die. He becomes absorbed in the absolute, as the space within a jar becomes absorbed in the outer space when the jar is destroyed. Whether he dies near a holy river or in an outcast's hut, whether he is conscious or unconscious at his death, he merges into freedom, into unity alone. All duties, wealth, enjoyments, liberation, all people and objects in the world as well. Everything in the eyes of a yogi is like the illusory water in a desert mirage. There is no action, either present, future, or past, which has been performed or enjoyed by me. This I know without any doubt. The Avadhut lives alone in an empty hut with a pure, even mind. He is always content. He moves about naked and free, aware that all this is only the self. Where neither the third state of deep sleep nor the fourth state, Samadhi, exists, where everything is experienced as the self alone, where neither righteousness nor unrighteousness exists, could bondage or liberation be living there? In that state where one knows nothing at all, this versified knowledge does not even exist. So now, while I am in the state of samsara, I, the Avadhut, have spoken of the truth. It is meaningless to differentiate between the void and the world appearance. It's pointless to speak of the real and the unreal. Oneself, unchanging, exists alone. This is what all the scriptures declare. In this composition by Sri Dattatreya, called the Song of the Avadhut, this is the first chapter, entitled The Instruction on the Wisdom of the Self. Is there anything you'd like to share, any reflections?
For me, like this text is like the ultimate deconstruction of a life. And that was a part that the text mentioned, the anxiety of the mind. And this text like transports me to that, not anxiety, but it's difficult not to get, at least for me, not get entangled in all the things that I think I have to do, like... So this makes sense, the anxiety of the mind, but it's a quite great challenge to alleviate the mind from that anxiety for me.
Yeah, an important thing to remember is that it doesn't all originate in the mind. Some of the anxiety is, you could say, it's tied up with beliefs. But some of it is a mirror of anxiety that is physical tension. It reveals itself as mental anxiety, as thoughts of worry, thoughts of problems, thoughts of negative consequences, thoughts of negative self-belief. There's, you know, all sorts of ways that the thinking can manifest, but it's mirroring tension that's existing in the physical body. And to the degree that that physical tension can be dissolved, released, dissipated, made to flow rather than be tension, that energy can be recovered, and the mind will very naturally reflect that other energetic state, that underlying energetic state. So it can be sometimes helpful to see what is the mind saying, perhaps, and sometimes not particularly helpful to listen to what the mind is saying, because it's mirroring what the body is saying, and sometimes just trying to find a justification for the feeling, the physiological state. So there's a physiological state of unrest, and the mind's trying to figure it out. Oh, it must be this, must be that. Maybe I have to do this. Oh, I should have done that. It's coming up with a narrative that makes sense of what we're feeling.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. It's like when hearing this text, it's like a feeling of nothing to do, it's all done, but then it enters that thing, oh, there is some things to be done, and there are some things to do, and
Yeah.
finding this alignment between these two.
Yeah. And notice that the text is taking us beyond the dichotomies, right? So to speak in the spirit of the text, there is neither something to be done nor nothing to be done. Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because if we take one of the two to be the truth, we'll think, oh, I do nothing then, because there's nothing to be done. It's simple, resolved, like I don't have anything to do, so I'll do nothing. But actually, that's taking a position that's within a dichotomy. And what the text is inviting you into is not literal inactivity, the denial of action, but the awareness that whatever action arises, it doesn't change your natural state. That what you are is independent of action and non-action. But actions, let's say in the relative world, actions arise. The desire for action arises. So it's not inviting you to sit still and be immobile and to perform no action, but to not be identifying with those actions, to not be caught up in them.
Isn't the mind also always interpreting according to its patterns? Like what we perceive? And yeah.
For sure.
Because
Yeah.
I realized that, like working with intuition, and also when I practice telepathy, I realized how difficult it is to actually translate what I openly receive. Yeah, because the mind didn't know it, so it couldn't translate it in a way. Yeah, it's very interesting to understand how the mind works. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But I've never seen it from the perspective that actually the body perceives something and then the mind reflects it. I've never seen it from that perspective. Actually, it's interesting.
yeah. it's very common in spirituality to be emphasizing, mind over matter, the top-down idea of we're creating our reality, which really emphasizes that everything starts with your mind, your thinking, and your experience is a sequential cascade from your thinking. And that's useful to be aware of if we're lacking awareness of the power of our mind. But it can be overemphasized to the point where we are not even aware of what's built up at the physiological level, at the somatic level, what's built up and has become, let's say, the baggage that we carry around, right? It's the memory of everything we have thought and felt and done. Our physiology has imprinted all of that. And so the mind, rather than being, just constantly free, is actually constantly tied and mirroring this somatic storehouse of information.
Yeah.
It's expressing that very data bank.
Yeah.
the body, the somatic.
There's also like a time lapse, right? Because the body sometimes receives things from the environment and like subconsciously, and we are not aware of it. And then we after like a millisecond only, we become aware of it. And then it's translated, into what we know, how we know it. Yeah.
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 There are controversies in science about the nature of consciousness, about whether we even have consciousness. It's a strange thing for science to be asking, for scientists to be asking, because you'd think logically they're asking that question with their consciousness, but the question of do we have consciousness is actually explored. And partly what's meant by that is, do we have real will? Do we have choice? Do we make any decisions? It appears that we do. Our mind tells us that we do, but the question is all of that, in some sense, a whole illusory play? Like, for example, and I'm not saying that this is accurate, but this is a question that is explored and to some extent comes up in the non-dual teaching. We could end up finding ourselves asking the same question. If the sense of self is in some way illusory, the self that we have identified with is in some sense illusory, then what is making decisions? Is something making decisions, or are decisions appearing to arise? And what is the relationship between the thoughts and the seeming decisions and the actions that arise? And in the field of psychology and what would be the field that specializes in this? Neuropsychology? I don't know exactly, but there are experiments that were done decades ago in which stimulus was done directly to the brain. Literally, I think that they did it in a pretty primitive way at the time, making holes in the skull and poking the matter of the brain with perhaps with electrical stimulus. I'm not sure if it was like a physical prod of something or with an electrical stimulus. But what they found was, for example, with a little prodding of the brain, then the person was conscious at the time, right? Because the brain itself doesn't have pain nerves, right? And so they could literally prod the brain without pain. They may have used a bit of something to sedate while they were making a hole in the skull, but the prodding of the brain itself seems to have been something they could do with a person perfectly awake. So prodding the brain, and they found if they prod in a specific spot, the person would raise their arm. And they'd prod again, and they raise their arm again. And but then they would say, so why you raised your arm? Why did you raise your arm? And the person would come up with a perfectly logical explanation. Oh, I felt I needed to stretch. So
that's the interpretation already.
right. The subjective experience was I know what I'm doing and I know why I'm doing it. Even when the observer could see that the cause was clearly coming from outside, subjectively, it was a decision. There was a reason behind it. Oh, I felt like I needed to stretch. You know, they already felt that there was a whole causality behind it. I felt a need to do it, and then I did it, right? It's clear from some experiences that I've had and observed relating to dreams that consciousness, or let's put it this way, our mind can work at lightning speed to come up with a story. In dreams, and I think this is, let's say, conventionally acknowledged, dreams can be happening very fast with a lot of content. If we don't have the external reference for the passage of time through our senses, the mind can be working at an incredible speed. When our senses are engaged, we're in time with the let's say, movements of the physical world. But when we're disengaged from the senses, the mind is, let's say, free to work at its own speed, which seems to be lightning speed. And the idea coming after a physical prod on the brain, the idea coming that I first felt like I needed to stretch, then I stretched, that's obviously coming at lightning speed. There's a background story that comes into play. It's a simple one, but still, it's the person is coming up with the feeling itself, right? Oh, I felt this. They're coming up with it after the poke, but you know, did they come up with it because they were asked the question? So they came up with it a few seconds afterwards, perhaps, or they came up with it in the moment they stretched. That's maybe not something that they explored at the time, but it seems we would be perfectly capable of coming up with it in the very moment that we stretch. You know, already have the explanation of like, oh, I'm doing this because.
Yeah. Are we not also usually put like defining consciousness as self-awareness, but it's actually self-awareness is much smaller than the consciousness.
Yeah.
Like that is in everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to think of that, you know, is it self-awareness or just awareness?
Yeah.
And what is awareness without self-awareness? What does that look like, feel like? What is that experience? What is what is awareness without the sense of self as the central reference point? What is just pure awareness? And
how do I know
exactly...
that I'm aware? Sorry,
say again?
How do I know that I'm aware in that moment? Yeah. Who knows that? Who is that? Or what is that knows that it is aware?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're really talking here about the, let's say, the frontiers of Samadhi, where there can be a sense of pure awareness without central reference, or even a place of such lack of reference that not only is there not a centralized sense of identity, I am experiencing this, there is not even this. There's no I and no this.
Yeah.
A kind of silence, an all-pervading silence. And so Samadhi has also been compared with deep sleep, dreamless sleep. Not only no stimulus of the senses, but not even content of memory, of thought, of imagination, just a beingness that has no particular content.
And that doesn't know that it is then.
Right.
Yeah.
In the moment itself, there is not even a knowing. There is nothing to be known. There's nothing being analyzed, nothing being compared with. The knowing, then using knowing in the conventional sense, right? To know something involves an object of knowledge and a subject that is knowing the object. And when the subject-object relationship is dissolved, there is no knowledge in any conventional sense, not even experience in the conventional sense. So one question that could come up is, well, is this desirable? Is this interesting? I mean, it sounds like deep sleep. Deep sleep's not that interesting. It can feel good after we've slept, right? We feel refreshed, recovered. And so what relationship do we have to this nothingness, fullness that is, in some sense, even beyond experience? And this also can bring us to the question, what is the nature of our seeking? What motivates us? What moves us to do a spiritual practice, to engage in some sort of spiritual discipline? What are we seeking? What is drawing us? What are we hoping to experience, what to achieve? What's our goal as we imagine it? What's pulling us or pushing us to something? What is that thing? When we speak of liberation, what are we expecting that to be? So I spoke of Samadhi and the threshold of Samadhi. There are two different types of Samadhi. I mean, there's more than two, but let's say there are two categories of interest here in this moment, which are, you could say, Samadhi without, what's referred to as without seed, Asamprajnata Samadhi. And there is Samadhi with seed in the sense of there being a point of awareness and therefore some sort of a reference. Your sense of self may have expanded, your sense of self may have altered, but there is still some sense of self. There's some reference point. There is an experiencer. Even if it's a radically altered sense of self that is experiencing. You could say it's your soul, your expanded consciousness, your pure being, but there is still some sense of being and experience. And for the most part, perhaps we long more for that, for a profound well-being, a desire for sustaining, attaining a kind of permanent, beautiful, blissful, divine well-being. There may be more a desire for that than the nothingness of deep sleep. there might even be fear of going beyond that threshold of experience into the dissolution. There might be fear, like the fear of death, the fear of the unknown, the fear of having no references, the sense of loss of everything that is known. So to again emphasize why I approach the Tantra foundations and the practices the way that I do, and really emphasizing the GraceFlow practice with the whole physiological process of coming to a felt sense of restful safety. It's because in that physiological state, the mind naturally rests, the meditative state naturally arises, Samadhi naturally arises. And with the physiological sense of safety, we can even rest in, let's call it infinity, in the unknown, in the absolute, because there isn't a grasping onto familiar experience for the feeling of safety or even of purpose. And here it's perhaps good to also speak of what yoga traditionally is doing. What is a yogi traditionally doing? What are they practicing asana for? If we speak of that aspect, the physical aspect of yoga, to a great extent, they're preparing to be able to sit still long enough, comfortably enough, without the restlessness, without the discomfort that brings attention to the senses and that, say, binds attention to the senses, allowing themselves to be in a restful state of awareness, prolonged enough for samadhi to be able to occur, and the resting in pure being, the coming to rest at all levels. Because without some degree of physical health and self-mastery, there will tend to be a restlessness in the body and discomfort in the body, which is binding attention back and preventing consciousness from experiencing unbounded awareness. But we're speaking here also of two different things, right? I want to remind you of the story I gave, let's say, the explanation or the idea of the ascetic yogi and the tantric yogi. The ascetic who idealizes the stillness to the point of idealizing, attaining Mahasamadhi as the ultimate transition from physical incarnation to pure consciousness. Basically, they'd be happy to let the body go, you know? And it's referred to as Mahasamadhi, that samadhi that is, in which there is no return to physical consciousness, to embodied consciousness. For an outside observer, they'd call it death, right? But it's the state of expansion of awareness to the point of no longer involving the body and nothing pulling back to the body. So the ascetic yogi would see that as their perfect attainment. The tantric yogi may undergo the same procedure, but while able to bridge this expanded state of consciousness with embodied consciousness. It doesn't mean that the tantric yogi will not enter into a samadhi that is like that deep sleep without self-reference. But they're not idealizing that above an embodied divinity. The ascetic will tend to negate the possibility of an embodied liberation. The tantric will say, yes, we can attain this expansion of consciousness, and yes, it can also happen through, in some sense, controlling the senses, pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses, the stillness of the body and the mind. Yes, all those yogic methods can be part of a tantric's sadhana, but it's not with the idea of this peak, the peak of ultimate experience being death, right? It's a coming back to inclusion of the fullness of what one is. So it's let's say, temporary release from the senses to recover the unbounded consciousness, and then what you could call the pure awareness and the Shakti, the energy associated with the divine, if you like. The words get messy at this stage, but awareness is brought back into the body. Energy is brought back into the body. It's woven, and using Taoist terminology, weaving heaven and earth. And in some sense, this is immortality. This is the attainment of the infinite, the transcendent, but embodied. Because at this level of experience, there is also self-knowledge has changed from the idea of a limited sense of self to a self that is infinite, that is infinity, and yet is experiencing through a body, as a body, experiencing individuality, but it is knowing its true nature. And that experiential knowledge, and it's, we spoke earlier about how knowledge is dependent upon subject and object, right? So it's after the dissolution, and it's on the threshold of the dissolution that knowledge can happen. But the deep sense of peace can remain and can be let's say, a transformed state. It can be a new ground of our being. When we spoke of ego dynamics, I referred to the, let's say again, the dichotomy of seeing yourself as separate or experiencing yourself as undivided, not separate, inherently whole, connected with all that is, as all that is. If you, and this is really what you find is that the language of the Dattatreya Gita, or the Avadhut Gita, it is speaking from, it is verbalizing from the experience of being one, not two, undivided, but also not divided, not undivided, beyond even these concepts, right? It's playing with this, the threshold of language even. The self-identity associated with the feeling of separation has the seeds of anxiety, of fear, of struggle, of the need to manipulate our environment and the beings in our environment and everything, including, you could say, manipulate reality itself. To the extent that if someone says, why did you raise your arm when your brain was poked? You'll tell them it's because you needed to, rather than, I have no idea. We'll manipulate truth to make sense of our experience. And we'll do it so fast, we don't know we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the gift of feeling safe is that you actually can acknowledge the not knowing without it being something that brings up fear. We can see things as they are instead of as we need them to be. And one of the great challenges is acknowledging the extent to which we need things to be a certain way, because it's invisible to us for the most part. The way that we're interpreting things, we're so fast at interpreting, and you could call it projecting meaning onto the world. We're so fast at doing it that we think we're looking at objective reality. We don't see ourselves having projected meaning, having created a whole causal narrative. And so you can think of, if we ask ourselves, what's the point of this samadhi, this deep nothingness? Ultimately, it gives us freedom from our compulsions, our compulsion to live in an imagined world instead of in reality.
I had one question that my mind got stuck on for a moment, and I think it's a good moment to bring that up. And the question is, why is attachment and impurity?
How and why is attachment an impurity?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
is it an impurity? Yeah.
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 Because he was speaking like impurities like attachment was the text, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah.
why is attachment? If I accept my human form and I know about my true nature and I don't forget it anymore, then how is attachment impurity? Is an interesting question.
So I think that the way to make that clear is to speak of what does purity mean. And in this context, the purity that is referred to is your pure beingness. It's not, let's say, correct behavior. It's your pure beingness. It's not a type of behavior, a type of attitude, a type of this or that or anything. It's your unbounded essence, not tied up with any identification And therefore, attachment would be a way of tying yourself up with identification. That is the nature of attachment, that you're tied up in something.
Yeah. So it's not, it's pure in the meaning like there's no, how did you say it?
No limitation.
Yeah, no identification. It's
Yeah.
not meant as a judgment that it's dirty or, Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and you can think of it as an analogy. In some sense, the idea of clean or dirty, pure or impure, these are terms that we can use to make a point, And if you're trying to make a point that there is the general human condition of feeling separate and feeling the suffering associated with that, and the restlessness associated with it, and the running after satisfaction without getting it. If you want to contrast that with what is possible for you, it is possible for you to be so clear about your true nature that you're no longer seeking what will not satisfy. And so in some sense, you are contrasting, therefore, the being bound and restless and endlessly seeking, or being free. And within that context, you could say one is your pure state. It is your pure natural state. And the other is in some sense stained, impure, unreal compared with what is your unchanging essence. So it's language that implies a kind of judgment, but it is contrasting. It's a language of contrast. It's not necessarily a judgment in the sense of, well, you should think less of people that are like this or like that, and you should see yourself as superior if someone else is. It's not a judgment that is separative, but is contrasting, and it gives you a sense of direction. Well, if this is meaningful to me, if this is desirable to me, if this is if I recognize that this is speaking of my true nature, and I recognize that there is a restlessness that occurs, then this, let's say, dualistic language, this judgmental language, it's not just saying I should feel guilty about doing things wrong. It's showing me more clarity about what I'm experiencing, So it can serve a purpose up to a point, let's say, to have a dualistic, contrasting, and if you like, in some sense, a judgmental language, because it gives you a contrast of this perpetuates pain and suffering for me. And that's in contrast to this abiding as my true self. So it comes out of compassion, these teachings, and it can seem contradictory in a way. Why? Because we think of judgment as implying some lack of compassion, or some lack of acceptance, right? If you think absolute acceptance might imply to us no judgment. And you find in the language of non-duality, of the non-dual teachings, and here in the Avadhut Gita, you find it's on the threshold of saying there is nothing to be achieved, nothing to be changed, but also the comparison, which seems like a different thing. There is suffering, and there is freedom from suffering. And there is suffering when you identify with what you're not, because it makes you restless. Makes you seek things that you think are going to give you peace, and they won't. And so you could say that out of compassion, dualistic language is used, because what else can you do with, let's say, human interaction, but use language, use stories, use images, all of them are going to be incomplete, right? A word is not the truth, nor is a string of words the truth. They can mirror, they can remind us, they can wake us up, but they're always going to, if we treat them as containers, they're going to be containing less than the absolute. But if we treat them as in some sense springboards, then they can be a point of opening. But you will find that a teacher, for example, such as Ramana Maharshi, who's an example of a non-dual teacher. This is him here on the right. He gave some teachings, you could say. He gave some practices, you could say, although people tend to not be aware that he gave any kind of practices. They tend to think that he only spoke in radical terms of, give up all practices, give up all seeking, give up all trying to get somewhere. He did give some practices in some cases. And much of the time, he also just remained in silence. People would go and see him and sit with him, sometimes asking questions, sometimes receiving some sort of guidance. But to a great extent, people would just sit in his presence. And his presence was enough, because the consciousness that was, in some sense, free in him was also transmitting a message of unbounded beingness without words. Of course, when we pick up a book, we get only the words part, but the silence is there implicit also. The space, the beingness. So if you have another couple of minutes, I'll share the practice that I'd referred to. It's labeled here as Kundalini Pranayama. First, I'll read this one page that describes it, and then you can do the practice. In this pranayama, the bhavana is more important than the ratio between puraka, kumbhaka, and rechaka. I'll explain this because this is following on from a previous practice that's more technical. But I'll explain these terms maybe next time so that we don't extend here. The important thing here is this is reference to bhavana, which is the feeling, the quality of your presence. It's you could call it the felt sense. Your feeling, or it's not just let's say an emotional state, but you could think of it as your vibration, quality of the state of your consciousness, bhavana. So in this pranayama, the bhavana is more important than measuring your length of your inhalation, how long you hold the breath for, and how long you exhale for. So then the indication is sit in Padma or Siddhasana, facing the east or the north. Padmasana is full lotus posture. Siddhasana is one leg on the thigh, but the other let's say, the other foot is on the floor. So like if you're sitting cross-legged, then you just lift one foot onto your thigh. Sometimes referred to as half lotus. So it indicates then some, let's say, traditional approaches to beginning a practice. After mentally prostrating to the lotus feet of the Satguru and reciting stotras in praise of God and Guru, commence doing this pranayama, which will easily lead to the awakening of the Kundalini. So in whatever way that is meaningful to you, you can direct a prayer, an acknowledgement of the divine as an entry point into the practice. And the direction you're facing influences your bioelectrical currents in alignment with Earth's bioelectrical currents, the greater field of prana. Inhale deeply without making any sound. As you inhale, feel that the Kundalini lying dormant in the Muladhara chakra, first chakra, is awakened and is going up from chakra to chakra. At the conclusion of the Puraka, the inhalation, have the bhavana, the feeling that the Kundalini has reached the Sahasrara, the crown. The more vivid the visualization of chakra after chakra, the more rapid will be your progress in this sadhana. Retain the breath for a short while. Repeat the pranava or your Ishta mantra. Pranava is Om, so you can repeat Om while you're holding your breath, or your Ishta mantra, so if you have, let's say, a personalized mantra that you've received, then you would use that, or Om. Concentrate on the Sahasrara chakra, on the crown. Feel that by the grace of Mother Kundalini, the darkness of ignorance enveloping your soul has been dispelled. Feel that your whole being is pervaded by light, power, and wisdom. Slowly exhale now, and as you exhale, feel that the Kundalini Shakti is gradually descending from the Sahasrara and from chakra to the Muladhara chakra. Now begin the process again. It doesn't tell you how many times to do the practice. It just it finishes here with, it is impossible to extol this wonderful pranayama adequately. It is the magic wand for attaining perfection very quickly. Even a few days' practice will convince you of its remarkable glory. Start from today, this very moment. May God bless you with joy, bliss, and immortality. So the key components really are your attention being drawn from the first chakra up with the inhalation, chakra by chakra. And think of this as happening within the center of your energetic system. So think of the chakras as having their origination point, their essence within the subtle channel within your spinal cord. Think of the energy body as having a pillar of light that is within the spinal cord, within the nervous system, right? The cerebrospinal system that goes down the spinal cord. So you're focusing on the essence, this place, this in some sense rod of consciousness or circuit, this current of consciousness, and drawing up through chakra by chakra to the Sahasrara. And when you reach the Sahasrara, experiencing the bhavana, the feeling of awakening, of energy fulfilled, reaching the peak place, the abode of Shiva, pure awareness, and find yourself experiencing light pervading your whole being, power, Shakti, pervading your whole being, all that is usually associated with, dissolved in this divine power, divine light. And also using Om, and you can be repeating Om silently as you're holding your breath. Let's say pulsing sense of Om, and exhaling down as if you're going down through, again, through each chakra, through the central channel, the heart, you could say, the seed of each chakra. I'll read just the very practical part of the description here again of what's written. As you inhale, feel that the Kundalini lying dormant in the Muladhara chakra is awakened and is going up from chakra to chakra. At the conclusion of the inhalation, have the feeling that the Kundalini has reached the Sahasrara, the crown. The more vivid the visualization of chakra after chakra, the more rapid will be your progress in this sadhana. Retain the breath for a short while. Repeat the pranava, the om. Concentrate on the Sahasrara chakra. Feel that by the grace of Mother Kundalini, the darkness of ignorance enveloping your soul has been dispelled. Feel that your whole being is pervaded by light, power, and wisdom. Slowly exhale now. And as you exhale, feel that the Kundalini Shakti is gradually descending from the Sahasrara and from chakra to the Muladhara chakra. If you'd like to continue with the practice after we finish here, you're welcome to continue. And when you do complete the active practice, also give yourself the permission, the time to just rest, to enjoy the quality of the fullness, the spaciousness, the peace. Big hug. Thank you for your presence, your participation. If you'd later like to share anything, feel free to write in the chat so we don't engage in analysis right now that we don't need to. Big hug.
Thank you, Peter. Big hug.
Ciao, António. Love to all of you watching the recording as well. Bye-bye.